Hello and welcome to Conversations with Dr. Greer. This is Dr. Stephen Greer. I'm the director of the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence and disclosureproject.org. And for those of you that are just joining us for the first time, welcome to the show. And we're going to have a really wonderful discussion today about extraterrestrial contact and what it's like really to set up a contact team where you live and kind of what's involved in that. And we have a member of our group who has a team in New York State, and so she will be reviewing a lot of her experiences and her own team's experiences over the last year or two since she got involved. And I'd like to thank the folks at the World Fusion Network for allowing us to be on the show every 2 weeks to bring you updates on the projects. And if you want to know more about what we're doing, you can go to cseti.org, cseti.org, or disclosureproject.org and see what we're doing related to the Disclosure Project and also making contact with interstellar civilizations. The protocols that we're using, just as a sort of a quick overview, and but we'll be going over in just a moment. But before I get there, I'd just like to introduce Marilyn. Marilyn came to us a couple years ago and came to a training expedition we did on the Outer Banks of North Carolina and has been to other ones since then around the world, and also to last year in Florida, or this year I should say, earlier in Marco Island, and lives in New York. And she is just a wonderful team member who's given this heart and soul. And Marilyn, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here.
So I think that one of the things that people need to understand before we get too much into how you've set up your group is that what it is that we actually do when we go out into the stars and make contact. And as you're going to find out in this discussion, sometimes we can't even go out. If the weather is so inclement, we do things inside. But this does not preclude contact from happening in all kinds of mysterious ways. And what most people are amazed to find out when they first begin hearing about what we're doing with contact with these interstellar civilizations that are visiting Earth is that the way in which they can reach out to us and that we can reach out to them is rooted in the ancient knowledge of consciousness that's in the Vedas and the science of consciousness, and involves the interface between awareness and linear space-time and electromagnetism. And the protocols we use involve that very expanded sort of universal paradigm of mind and consciousness and how mind and consciousness interface with three-dimensional space-time and reality. And this is because when you're looking into civilizations that go faster than the speed of light, they are doing so by going through other dimensions. Some people call them dimensions or fields of reality. And you're not going to go from here to another star system at the speed of, say, the space shuttle. Or, for example, we just launched this probe to Mars this week that's going to get there in about 8.5 months. That's just to Mars, which is, of course, the closest planet to us. And therefore, the question becomes, how do you go from one star system to another? Well, it certainly isn't with a rocket or a jet. And it certainly isn't with even an ion pulsed engine or anything like that that's been proposed in conventional sciences of the 20th century. You're going to be doing it through very high voltage electromagnetic systems that allow the spacecraft and its occupants to resonantly shift out of linear space-time and three-dimensional space-time into another dimension and then appear at another point in space. And so literally you're bypassing linearity. So instead of going from point A to B, you find that there are dimensions that are more intimately related to all points in the universe. And this gets into the whole science of trans-dimensional reality. Now, the ultimate connecting point in all of this is consciousness, pure consciousness. And everyone on this program, since it's the World Puja Network, understands the power of the collective mind, but also individual awareness when it merges into the ocean of unbounded mind and universal consciousness. And the entire cosmos is a conscious hologram that every star, every atom, every photon is fluxing in and out of a multipotent sea of not only energy, but also awareness, and that between pure consciousness and linear space-time are an almost infinite number of gradations or dimensions. It's sort of like if you were going to be looking at, the analogy I often use, although it's a very crude one, is that if you had an old-fashioned radio where you have to turn the dial and you're shifting from one channel to another channel to another channel, but you can go up and down the FM dial, and sometimes you could pick up a station and then another station, and sometimes multiple stations, and you could hear 3 or 4 radio programs kind of going on in the background at the same time. Well, in a similar way, there are dimensions folded within any volume of space-time, and in fact, there are an infinite number of degrees. It's like, how many numbers are there between 1 and infinity? Well, that's how many gradations and resonant fields potentially exist in any volume of space. And the finest level of that is pure consciousness, where it is omnipresent, where when you meditate, you go into a state where you can experience non-locality, where you can be in a place of the placeless, as it's been called by the mystics. And in that meditative state, you can then be at any point in space and time. Well, that's on the level of consciousness and then thought, but it also can happen that way on the level of technology and science, where sciences that are very high voltage systems allow a material spacecraft, and people with physical bodies, although they may not be human, can resonantly shift, become not bound to linear space-time, go into another dimension, and therefore the quote-unquote travel time between another galaxy in here, instead of being millions of light years, might in fact be a few seconds or a few days. And the physics of this are really fascinating, but it informs the protocols we're using, which involve using the conscious mind to go into a deep meditative state, and we use a mantra for this, and then experiencing the state of quiet, pure mind, and then within that quiet space, begin to remote view and see other planets, other peoples, other spacecraft, and where they may be. And then once one gets a sense of non-locality, that one has expanded into this ocean of quiet mind and can function within that state, you then kind of turn it around to a active vectoring, where if you see, for example, a spacecraft out in our solar system, you might connect to the occupants and then show them that you're in New York, or out in upstate New York or someplace out in the countryside, and you would show them our planet, and you would show them where you are, zooming in like you would on Google Earth, right all the way to where you're located, and invite them there in a spirit of universal peace that's based in this concept of universal awareness. And so we call this the Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind initiative, where humans make contact with these other civilizations for the purpose of expanding our relationship to the interplanetary level. And so the really central operating system, if you want to look at it from a computer point of view, is this universal mind. And from that, the protocols flow. And this is why people who understand higher states of consciousness and other dimensions really make very excellent ambassadors to these interstellar civilizations, because their reality is that for them to travel and communicate across the vastness of space, they have to understand this concept and this paradigm. They have to have gone beyond the sort of Newtonian, reductionist, linear 3D paradigm in order to go from a distant star system or galaxy to Earth. Now, as you go to disclosureproject.org, you'll see that there's abundant evidence that we are being visited. But you then have to ask the question, if they're here, how did they get here? What is the operating paradigm? And you quickly come into this realization that the knowledge that's in the ancient Vedas and in the ancient teachings in traditions all over the world, the shamans, the Native Americans, in every tradition of this aspect of awareness that is universal and infinite and omnipresent, is very key to this, because the communication systems that they have, and granted they are material communication systems that are very high-tech electronics, they interface with directed and coherent thought as clearly as you and I would connect with a telephone or a cell phone. Now, we're using, of course, electromagnetic signals that are limited to the speed of light when we use our telephones. But we're talking about civilizations that are thousands, or in many cases, millions of years more developed than we are technologically right now on Earth. And what that means is that we have got to understand that new paradigm of conscious quantum reality in order to be ambassadors to these civilizations, because it informs our protocol for contact, but it also informs the kind of experiences we can have, which to some people might seem rather bizarre. For example, stepping outside of the Hollywood movie set for a moment, when an actual extraterrestrial civilization makes contact, it may be that they would choose, for security reasons, not to actually fully materialize in this dimension. They may do something through an electronic system. They may do something through an electronic magnetic field detector, like we take out into the field. They may actually appear as a sort of a plasma-like spherical ball or an energy field in the room where you're sitting. And there could then be communication that would be telepathic, or there could be psychokinesis. There could be all kinds of things that would be attributed to what are called the Vedic siddhis, S-I-D-D-H-I-S, the powers and abilities of the ancient Vedic knowledge, including levitation, dematerialization, teleportation, bilocation, trilocation, quadrilocation, where you appear in multiple places at the same time. On and on and on and on. And the reason for that is because the experiences of people who have been in these enlightened states of consciousness is that they have actually begun to journey into these dimensions which interstellar civilizations must have perfected in order to get here. They cannot get here using a shuttle, space shuttle, or a rocket, or something that is going slower than the speed of light. And so I've written a great deal in the books that I've put out about the crossing point of light, that when you reach this point where you cross into this whole aspect of the universe, some would say a multiverse, where you have energy fields and realities, you're in a very deep state of reality that's beyond the speed of light, and you find yourself suddenly in getting into experiences that are very similar to, for example, an astral lucid flying dream. And almost everyone's had a dream where they've found themselves flying over some place, or had a precognitive dream. Well, this so-called astral energy field of the body of light is another dimension, even though it's folded within our physical body. So there's no separation in space. You have to not think in a linear way. And this is why these extraterrestrial civilizations can pop into our reality and be manifested in ways that can go everything from a fully materialized spacecraft, which we've had overhead and we have images of, to choosing, for whatever reasons, to be present in energy fields that are more subtle, all the way into and including thought. And for those of you who understand the power of sound and the mantras, into tonality. We have been out under the stars before, or in a room having a session where a perfectly beautiful chime, like a almost celestial tone, comes out of thin air. And people sitting in the circle with us will see in their mind's eye the form of a spacecraft, a spherical spacecraft that will float through the field, and you can actually see it. But with the physical eyes, you don't see anything. You just hear. And again, this gets into the Vedic concept of name and form, where tonality manifests form and light, not the other way around. And so this is a really exciting sort of exploration where we're bringing together the science of consciousness in the ancient Vedas with the space age and this whole new area of science. And that's what we're putting into practice, actually, out under the stars when we make contact and go and make contact together. And so we also use some high-powered lasers, which we send out into space. We have one that goes about 200 or 300 miles into space. And then we have also some electronic beeping tones that were recorded in the crop circles that we got from Colin Andrews that we send out over radio signals, just in case our mind, when we're trying to show them where we are, isn't as clear and they need a specific linear vector of exactly where we are. We use the lasers and the tone. So those three things, light, tone, and thought, are the core of the protocols we use, but it's done within the concept of our viewing ourselves as ambassadors of peace from Earth to these civilizations. So what we have concluded is that they really are eager to have people reach out and make contact like this, and they give us a great deal of information, even about their worlds. We recently got a question from someone listening to the World Puja Network. Well, why don't they give you, well, they do. We'll have images in our minds where they will be sending to us what their planets look like, what their people look like, what their houses and architecture look like. And even what their culture and life is like back on their home planets. We recently have had a number of people in our teams who have had amazing experiences with this. And so there is a sort of cultural exchange going on a very profound level. And within that, there can be all these different manifestations and phenomena that are electronic, tonality, objects that appear, orbs that float through the room or the field, all kinds of amazing experiences. And so in training people to do this, of course, we bring people out under the stars. I've been trying to do this 4 or 5 times a year where we set up a week, and we're going to be going to Marco Island, Florida in April, and we're going to go to a site where we have a beach that last year we had really an entire 3.5-hour emergence, I call it, transdimensional objects that were on the beach and over the ocean and over the lagoon in front of us for 3.5 hours. That was just astonishing in terms of what was being seen, but what was in the other dimensions was even more profound. And so at the same time, we're having electronic communication through magnetometers and radar detectors and things like this going off. There are all these other phenomena. And then on the conscious level of remote viewing within our awareness, there are conversations and images and information being downloaded. So all of this is going on very dynamically. And we take a week to go out together to train people for this so that they can then go back home. And this recent expedition we had in California, for example, we had people from Germany and from England and from Malaysia and from all over the world who then go home and do what Marilyn's been doing there in New York. So with that little introduction, sort of quick overview, I'd like for Marilyn, for you to kind of share sort of how you got involved and also the experiences you've been having there in New York with your own local contact team.
Well, Stephen, I never tire of hearing your overview of this. I never heard anybody describe it like you can describe it, and it's thank you. I came to the Outer Banks in 2009, and it was an incredible experience, and I came back home, and there happened to be 3 of us from New York, Diane and I and Eric, who had attended that, and so we started. Because once you have this kind of shift in consciousness and your whole worldview is just remarkably changed. And
yes.
So it's a very lonely experience to come back, and so we decided we had to get together, the 3 of us, and we went out on top of a mountain, and we started doing our own sea SETI at night. And we had extraordinary experiences, and so we said, well, it is possible to have these experiences without Dr. Greer.
Oh, yes.
Because, of course, we followed the protocol, and this consciousness and contact is intertwined and is is the truth. And so we started doing that, and then as more people had gone to CSETI ambassador trainings with you, there were more people in the area. Now we have such an incredible, cohesive group. And people, you know, Stephen, the thing that's so amazing about gathering this group, and we all need it for support because we're all going through these amazing changes. And so gathering in such a safe environment with other like-minded people becomes paramount. And we have people from all walks of life. We have people in the legal profession. We have a guy that works for the sanitation department in New York City. We have a psychologist, which I am, and a social worker, and a massage therapist, and a nurse, and an attorney. I mean, and an entertainer from New York, and farmers, and it's just marvelous.
That's
how
awesome. Yeah.
The one thing we have in common is this commitment to holding a space. And sometimes we hold the space for hours to expand the spiral of conscious cohesiveness in the group. And as we've met over the months, our group has gotten so incredible, and some of the experiences have just been marvelous. I want to share one, actually, that happened recently. But as one member of our group put it, it feels like we are developing our own signature energy for the ETs.
That's right.
And
we do.
It really is quite extraordinary. So we gathered, there's global CSETIs all throughout the world once a month, where everybody on the planet who has a local CSETI, we all go out the same night, Saturday night, with the new moon. And on October 29th was one, and so our group gathered, even though there was a snowstorm in October in New York on that day. So what we decided is everybody was going to come up and stay for the night so they wouldn't have to worry about the snow. So people came, and we gathered. There were 6 of us, amazingly enough, in the storm. And we were in the dining room to start the evening just chatting together, and a flash came through the window, and 2 of our members saw this flash, and we immediately said, okay, it's time to go up to the meditation room. Well, we went up, and we were listening to the crop circle tones, actually, and all of us just kind of went right into a meditation. And after the meditation, three of us had this same exact event happen, where we saw the ETs entering the room, giving us a gift of some kind, and each of us saw ETs behind us and in front of us giving us these gifts, and each one had a slightly different twist on that. But 3 out of 6 had the same meditation. And
wow.
All of us were visualizing there were fairy ETs, and one of our members constantly works with this jellyfish ET. And we saw a lot of orbs coming in the room. And the thing that was so exciting about this, Stephen, is people often think, well, we have to go out and sit under the stars. But this was all done inside. We couldn't go out and sit outside. Right. And inside, we started seeing white, green, and purple orbs. And we started seeing flashes outside. And this whole time we were in the meditation room, the tri-field electromagnetic meter was going off pretty much the whole time, and we'd never had it go off inside like that before. So we took a break, and when we came back from break, we went up to this yoga loft we have and expanded our meditation, and we were holding hands for the meditation, and little did any of us know that we were holding hands in a circle for 2.5 hours. And we thought when we came out of this meditation, we thought we had only been there for 30 minutes.
Wow.
And during that time, the temperature changed. There was energy fluxing in and out of the room from the windows like I have never seen. Amazing, like electrical, beautiful fluorescent colors were right in the room. At one point, I had visualized and remote viewed a spacecraft that was right on top almost of our roof of the house, and it was this incredible craft that came down. And at that time, people started feeling vibrations in the floor. The floor to some felt moving. People began getting touched. And finally, there was a flash outside, right outside. We were on the 2nd floor in this yoga loft, and right outside, coming from the ground, was this incredible blue-green, huge flash. And it happened 3 times. And at the 3rd time, couple of our members saw at the corner of the window a circle of red, blue, yellow, and green light in the yard, and then a flash emanated out of that. And at that third time when that flash came, we lost power in the entire house. And that power went off for 2 hours, and the next day we all went outside to see if there were lines down or transformers. Nothing had happened. There were no lines down. The transformers were fine, but we had just simply lost power when that last incredible burst of energy came from the ground in the front yard, not far from where this room was. And that's awesome. That was just awesome. So at that point, the power was off. We decided to all go to bed, and one of our members was sleeping downstairs, and she went to sleep, but she was hearing taps on the window, and she kind of pulled her blanket up over her head and said, all right. And at some point, she saw a green being beckoning her outside, and the next thing she knows, she was on a craft, and she spent the night on the craft. And, Stephen, the next day when she came up, I said, I hope it wasn't too hot down there for you. I hope the temperature was okay. And she said, I don't think it really mattered because I wasn't there most of the night. And she came upstairs and her pant legs, now mind you, there's snow on the ground outside, her pant legs are wet with dirt on them. And she had just taken clean sweats out of her knapsack and put them on before bed.
Right. And
they were all wet, no place else in her body, just her pant legs where they would have been in the snow.
Right, right.
So that was an incredible experience that night. And, you know, I think the remarkable thing is that it was indoors. They made themselves known through our tri-field electromagnetic meter. They made themselves known through the electricity by the power going out. Several people had cameras. The batteries didn't work. That is one place they come in, and we saw these beautiful light flashes that this craft must have been, I would say, no further than 100 feet above the house.
Right, right. I'm sure. And the thing is that people, when they hear these stories, they understand the light that you see is so celestial and beautiful. It's not like when you see a helicopter or a light from a car or something. These lights have a brilliance and a purity to them, where you can tell that it's literally coming from another dimension.
It's so true. We were all just so affected. Yes. I think we were affected. The light. All of us still can't stop talking about how that light affected us.
And the light does, and actually the light is conscious. And so what you have to understand about really advanced civilizations, the ones that are at the level of cosmic awareness and God consciousness, those civilizations, even though they have physical worlds like Earth and bodies like we have, even their technologies are a reflection of their level of consciousness. So, and that is true, that if you look at any civilization, the level of technology they have is a reflection of the collective level of attained consciousness. So when an entire planet attains, for example, enlightenment, which is where Earth and humanity is headed, and we attain that state, even our sciences and technologies reflect that level of knowing and consciousness, even at the level of what would appear to be just scientific and material, quote-unquote, sciences, but they're actually emanating from that level of intelligence and knowledge and enlightenment. And you feel that and know it when you see these, and it's very, very unmistakable. It's very different than seeing a Boeing 747 or something. And so, which is a reflection of, sort of mid 20th century technology. I remind people jet engines and things are from the 30s, and cars are from the late 1800s. The internal combustion engine and rockets are from 1942 or so. And all the other really advanced sciences and technologies have been stolen, basically, and are classified. But when you have these encounters, the ET civilizations that are interstellar and going beyond the speed of light into these other dimensions, but then can emerge into this dimension, what you see, even if they're not fully materialized, even these evidences of them, the light, the tonality, everything is so pure, it's so beautiful, and it's very much in coherence with their level of consciousness. And that's why it's so affecting.
Well, you know, you can always feel the difference when the tones come or the lights come, because it's so heartfelt.
Yes.
It's like it's consciousness felt, and if you don't experience that, that's probably a funny way to describe it. But you feel it in your consciousness and you feel it in your heart.
Absolutely, it's beautiful, really, and the heart is the feeling part of this is very key, because our entire bodies are very advanced electromagnetic conscious receivers. And I mean, we have these other technologies we have out there, but in reality, the best instrument there is in the entire cosmos is the conscious intelligent beings that inhabit the cosmos, and our chakras and our minds and our bodies and the bioelectric field of our bodies, and where that interfaces with thought and consciousness and feeling and heart and spirit. These are all at play and all in use when we're making contact. And so it's not like it's just like you're in a laboratory measuring, an electromagnetic potential, although certainly we have devices that do measure electromagnetic potential. And for those of you who haven't heard this program before, this meter she's talking about measures the magnetic field flux or change. And so, the Earth has a magnetic field, and these meters, like if you take it up to a car engine or a motor, will make a very loud squeal because of the magnetic field that electromagnetic motors make. But we can be in areas where, we set it to zero so that the background is at zero. And then when these ET vehicles and beings and their presence begins to come into this dimension, they actually set these meters off, and often in a way where they begin to go into the circuitry of the electronics of our meters and are talking, where they're actually providing information. And the last book, the last chapter of the book that came out a couple years ago, that's called Contact, Countdown to Transformation, which is at disclosureproject.org. You can get it there. And it has a DVD with it that has some of the tones that we've recorded, but also the translation that I experienced when we had contact from these ETs from the Orion sector of space that made contact with us over the last couple of years in the Joshua Tree National Park when we were out there. And this kind of contact is very specific because these detectors make a sort of a tonality, and it's almost like there's an emotional quality to some of them where they're actually speaking and they're using these electronics and coming into the circuitry of the electronics while there's all these other amazing phenomena going on, such as these lights and bursts of light and circles of light that appear. And then on the level of consciousness, the remote viewing of the mind, those, I tell people, these sort of phenomena are just really like indicators of what's really going on the conscious level. And that on the internal level of remote viewing and in the meditative state, there's this entire richness where you see the actual beings and their craft and their worlds, and conversations occur and all of that. And that's one of the things we train people to do, is to set up the entire range of experience that goes from, whether it's a fully materialized craft or object, to the ability to go into deep, silent, meditative states and then remote view and communicate with these civilizations using consciousness and thought. And in that sense, I mean, truly cosmic ambassadors. And this is a growing experience for everyone. And I'm very interested. What of the experience your colleague who had the wet pants, who the base of her pants that got wet from being in the snow, that heard the tapping on the window. Did she remember much else about what happened that night?
Well, yes. She was on a craft with several different kinds of ET. She remembers actually fish beings and green ETs especially.
Right.
And she is pretty new to this whole process, so she was like, I think it sounds pretty silly to say there are fish ETs, but of course there are. And she was on this craft with a variety, and she was just really felt like she was downloaded with tremendous amounts of information, which keeps coming through her dreams now. So,
and that's how it happens. One of the things is that when you're having an experience, you might be out for an evening, and there'll be an experience, but the knowledge is in the level of what I call those. I'm sure everyone on this program understands what Ritambhara Pragya is, or if you don't, I'll explain it. The level of consciousness that's just this side, as it were, of the plane of the absolute unbounded mind. In that most subtle field of consciousness, there's a level where all knowledge is contained. It's like the door of knowledge or the book of knowledge, but it's actually encoded within every single human being's awareness. And this is the wellspring of science and art and invention and inspiration, where people say, I don't know how I knew that, it just came.
Right.
Because within every person who is conscious and awake, which is all of us, is the totality of the unboundedness of the being. And that means that we can access that knowledge. But what happens in contact, when it's on this deep level, the ETs can communicate, and it doesn't have to be in a language. It can be with this very elemental level of communication where it's like a packet of knowingness. It's like a packet of knowledge. And that kind of unfolds into conscious mind and into our understanding of intellect and language. And it may be months. It may take years for it to unfold, or it may unfold more quickly. And this is another aspect of contact that is just beautiful.
Well, it's funny because the night before this group met this last time, I was wide awake in the night, and all of a sudden I heard this beautiful cricket sounds, but they were not like earthquake crickets, and I knew very quickly that this was an incredible sound coming in from the ETs, and my ears got incredibly heavy with this cricket sound that went on and on and on, and then I began to slowly discern the information that was held in this cricket sound. And some of the information was about what was going to happen in our local CSETI group the next day, but it comes in different packets of energy, sound being one of them.
Right, exactly. And the sound component of thought is what a mantra is, by the way. And this is why, if you go to every culture, you find there's this very important connection between chanting or singing or drumming, music, mantras, in terms of it activating and allowing the mind to settle into a state that's very, very deep consciousness that goes beyond just one's individual self into this great self, into this bounded aspect. And many traditions have elements of this. But it's also true that when contact is happening, we have these experiences where we have been in rooms where I've been given a talk at a training when we're on these expeditions. In fact, this happened recently in California, where everyone in the room suddenly hears this beautiful tone that comes in, and it happens at a certain point when we're having a deep discussion about something very spiritual or very important, and that's how they're affirming it or contacting. But within that tone, frequently there is this knowledge within the tone. But it's not language like, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. So all of this gets into really advanced concepts of communication. For example, I can say the word apple, and everyone knows the word in English apple, but you can see in your mind, visualize a red, delicious apple. Well, then you've created it in the astral, mental visualization. But within the red, delicious apple is a tonality that transcends its form, that manifests the form. And then within that tonality, it's connected to sort of a primal tone that's the emanation of all knowledge. And so this is why every blade of grass is a doorway into the knowledge of all things, and why you can experience a contact where the communication comes into these packets, and within that packet might be an enormous amount of specific information, and it unfolds later in meditation or in lucid dreams, or just comes to you as sort of a remembrance, because that's the nature of non-locality and consciousness and communication. And this is what's so exciting, is that this is how I first experienced contact when I was 18, and I went on board this craft that took me out into space, and we created these protocols together, these extraterrestrial people and myself. And I was this young boy, and 6 months earlier I'd had a near-death experience that opened me up to the reality of conscious existence. And before that, I was raised, my family were very devout atheists and didn't believe in anything. And I would say they're fanatical agnostic atheists, and nothing could possibly exist if it wasn't in a test tube. But what I found was that the whole conscious universe was folded within us, and that you can experience that. And so I started practicing meditation. Then I learned a mantra meditation, and I was sitting up on this mountain, and I had this experience. And a lot of people have asked me, and I understand why they ask me this, but they'll say, oh, what did y'all talk about? I go, no, it wasn't like that. It wasn't like, gee, let's talk about, that, I went to the store today and bought some really, great Mejdoul dates, and they were delicious. I mean, it wasn't like that. It was it was very much where we were together in this state of pure consciousness, and the communication and the contact was all on, it sounds abstract, but it's actually very profound, of oneness and conveyance that was in a form that was pre-verbal, beyond linear. And that is exactly how many people will experience this. Now, other people will get very specific images and very specific words, and people say, well, do the ETs know English? I'm going, well, the thing is, you have to understand that conscious mind, and all of us are in this state of oneness, whether we acknowledge it or not. That is the universal translator. Mind itself is the uber cosmic translator. So it doesn't matter what the originating language is or the person who's receiving it is in. It's going through the field of conscious intelligence, and that provides a translation into your own language. It's amazing.
Yes.
Okay, well, I don't know if we're getting into too deep, but this is really how it happens in terms of just sharing the truth of it. And that's why these experiences, I'm so thrilled to hear, of these experiences people having all over the world. It's so gratifying to me.
Well, I'll tell you, Stephen, when you begin to listen to what you're talking about, it is much easier to understand things like remote viewing.
Right.
And just to add on to what happened to our group that night, one of the members was home in Albany, couldn't make it. So we said to her, we called exactly when we started. She went into meditation, and I said, write everything down. Well, later the next day, we checked with her to see what she wrote down, and we already knew what happened in our group. Well, she remote viewed the exact room we were in, and we always have a choice of 2 rooms. She knew which room we started in. She saw it. She saw the craft over the house.
Right.
She saw the what else did she see? Oh, she had the same vision of the ETs coming into that room, standing with by each one of us and giving us something, so that was 4 of us that had the exact, and she wasn't even there. And
right.
That was all through remote viewing, and she's pretty new to this, and it's amazing.
Yeah, that is. And this is what I tell people. A lot of people go, oh, well, I've really never practiced meditation, or I practice it, but I've never had any experiences. We had a medical doctor recently who is a Stanford-trained physician who came just the Crestone to his first week event in Colorado in July, or was it June? It was June. And, but he had this amazing breakthrough experience that was the most extraordinary, very extraordinary meditation experience of his whole life. And he'd been on, many, many meditation retreats. But the combination of the coherence of the group and the protocols that we're teaching that involve the specific tonality of this 3-part mantra and of course we always do a puja. We do a puja, try to do one each night now when we go out on these expeditions. Since we're on the World Puja Network, I wouldn't talk about this. I was on some of the New York Times, but because they wouldn't understand what a puja is, but everyone on this show understands that. And we do a sacred puja, and we sit in meditation, and then there's this group coherence where, I'll lead the meditation, but it's the group coherence, and the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, because when you have all these people experiencing that state of consciousness together, there is a power created and there is a coherence created that is actually not just arithmetically additive, but is exponential.
Well, the whole is more than the sum of the parts when that
Absolutely,
happens.
absolutely. And Dr. John at Princeton, when he had the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab, the PEER lab, he and I talked about this, and he said, well, what you're doing out under the stars is what I've been doing in the laboratory, where he would take people and have them, put their intent on a random number generator or a robot, and it would have an effect. But he found that if there were two people who loved each other or who were coherent, the effect wasn't just additive, it was exponential. And so there is the power of a group doing this together who are coherent. Now, of course, dealing with the human condition, finding a coherent group is always a challenge because, we all have our individualities and our egos.
Right. Well, yes. But I'll tell you.
If you do the meditation together, it kind of smooths out the rough edges. And the main thing is to look for people who are doing this contact together who have the intent. And if the intent and the purpose is what unites everyone.
Oh, and it's so true. And in our group, even here, I mean, it is that coherence that we are building. So, and it's taken us many, many months to build this.
Sure.
But when we meet and we have this, the experiences not only are intensifying, Stephen, but we're having more and more similar experiences. We're seeing similar colors. We're having similar meditations. We're hearing similar sounds. I mean, and more experiences, and it is truly now a group experience. Yes, everybody in the group still has their individual meditations and visions and remote views, but more and more we're finding there's a whole new group experience. And as far as I'm concerned, this is the prototype. The way we've worked on this group and the way your ambassador trainings go is the prototype for what all groups can be on this planet.
Absolutely, you're right, and it creates this wonderful experience, very joyful and blissful, actually. And then once there is that level of coherence, a lot of people think that I'm going to come to a workshop where they sit back passively, and they don't realize they're plugging into this universal field together, and they're making the contact together, and they're manifesting that reality together. And that is a very, very different paradigm than from, say, someone who's viewing it. You're going to go to a workshop and do your own thing, and that. Well, and it's a process to get your mindset adjusted to that. But it's very important because the extraterrestrial civilizations function in teams that are highly, highly coherent, and they are looking for people individually but collectively who are in that state of coherence, because what we have to do is go from people having sort of anecdotal one-on-one experiences with seeing a UFO or a contact experience to teams of people, and that's setting up the morphogenic field, the 100th monkey effect, as it were, for the entire globe of Earth, all of humanity to have that experience. And that is where we're headed, because we're headed into a future of enlightenment and interplanetary civilization. And so where does that start? It doesn't just happen by waving a magic wand. We're actually all part of like the cells of an organism, of a body that is conscious and living together. We're all creating that reality. And that's why these contact teams are so important all over the world that are doing this. And people who want to join, by the way, if you have an iPhone or an iPad, there's an app at the Apple Store, the CSETI Contact app, where all these protocols and the meditation and everything's on there. And they're also at disclosureproject.org. There's a place there where you can order a whole training kit to set up a contact team wherever you live. And because not everyone can take a week off and go out into the desert or wherever, or Marco Island. But if you can do one of these week-long expeditions, I think it's valuable for folks to do it.
And I want to say that I think one thing I've learned both from the ambassador trainings and our local CSETI group is that this isn't just about contacting ETs, that when we sit together and we're in this cohesive consciousness together, and part of what our group feels is this unconditional, most remarkable love for each other,
right,
and peace for each other. And so it's about both having the motivation to contact ETs and learning about the science of consciousness in such a way that our group evolves into that coherent consciousness. And that's where we have to be as a human race, in my mind, is understanding that this is where we have to evolve to. Yes, it is how also to contact ETs, but I think the ETs are incredible in helping us, and you design a protocol of understanding how when we raise this consciousness, we do have contact. That's the key, and they're intertwined. However, we need to be doing the science of consciousness work, both as individuals and in groups on Earth anyway.
Right.
And as we do that, we will be probably more accepted into the Star Brotherhood and Sisterhood because
Sure.
we will become a peaceful planet.
Right, and that's the entry. People always ask me, well, why isn't there more open contact? I remember Larry King on CNN, the Larry King live show. I said, well, why don't they just land on the White House lawn and get it over with? I'm going, well, maybe the consciousness isn't there.
Right.
And maybe, what has to happen is that there has to be evidence that we are a peaceful civilization.
Exactly.
For that kind of more. And so the entry ticket to this kind of more and increasing levels of open contact is a peaceful global civilization, and also where we not only are going to live peacefully on this planet, but also vow to go out into space peacefully. It's not enough to say, oh, well, we're going to unite the Earth and be peaceful here, but we're going to set up war with this ET race or that ET race out in space. That whole Star Wars mentality has got to be put to bed. And that is really key, because one of the key things to being part of these contact teams is to be truly an ambassador to the universe. And we do this without prejudice and without the concept that there's going to be this idea that, well, we want to have contact with this civilization, but not that civilization. And, we like the ones that are this shape and color and type and mythology that's associated with them. And we don't like the ones of this shape and size and color of that mythology. In other words, what we don't want to do is do an anthropocentric projection of the kind of dysfunction and nonsense that's gotten us into the situation we're here today, where every race and every creed and every religion is warring and blowing each other up, and then begin to replicate that dysfunctional paradigm in space.
Right.
Which is, unfortunately, if you go to a UFO conference, the reason I'm always depressed when I go to one of those, even though I'm often a keynote speaker, is that so much of the stuff is just so atavistic and very not in a good way, but in a sort of Stone Age mentality of us versus them. And I get occasionally interviewed by a documentary, and they talk about the alien invasion and agenda, and I'm going, oh my God, But so much of that, I always talk about the cosmic mirror. The way people view these civilizations and visitors, I think, is a mirror of themselves. And I think
Stephen, we call that in psychology a reaction formation. Not like that yourself, you give to others. That's exactly what that is.
It sure is. It is it's a classic reaction formation.
And that's why these trainings and the establishing, being ambassadors and gathering together as ambassadors, that is changing the world, because we gather together only with that peace, only with that love, and only with that understanding of consciousness. And like you said, that will change the morphogenic field of this planet.
And that's the future of the planet. And it's not only, once that is understood and we vow to live that way, then everything is possible. I mean, when I say everything, it's all right there ready to come out. And Disclosure Project is work on bringing out the evidence that we're being visited. CSETI is doing the work that is this contact and having contact teams all over the world. And then the Orion Project.org has been working on educating people about the energy and propulsion systems and the new sciences and technologies that are transdimensional. And all of this has to be coming into fruition within the context of a peaceful paradigm, because the technologies can't be brought out and then been bent to the purpose of war. They have to be brought out and put to the purpose of peace, healing the earth, creating abundance, being sure that everyone on earth is cared for so that they can be educated and grow into higher states of consciousness.
And we can have.
That's the vision.
And I also want to say, Stephen, that we always get together and we talk about what's happened in between times, and slowly, even in the last 2 years, I've seen things begin to accelerate in terms of everyday people's consciousness. Eric was driving out to our CSETI night on Saturday. He went through a small town, because we live out in the boonies. He went through a small town that's notorious for picking up people for speeding. Sure enough, a cop stops him, and the cop says, "I need to know where you're going." And he says, "I'm going out to an ambassador's local CSETI night to contact ETs." And the cop says, "What the heck are ETs?" And he goes, "We're contacting extraterrestrials." And the cop goes, "Oh, wow, that's really cool." He goes back. He goes back to his car to write out the ticket. He comes back and he says, "I'm not going to give you a ticket." And Eric got, isn't that? So even, it's just, we all laugh because I think it's a litmus test of slowly but surely people are more open.
Oh, very much so, and it's so wonderful. I was going through LAX airport last month and coming back from these meetings in Hollywood and LA and the desert with our team, and I had gone through TSA, and there was a whole group of young, like college-age guys, a group of 3 or 4, and I started hearing my name called, and they started chasing me down the concourse. "Oh, we just love this, and we're doing it also, and you don't know who we are." And so it's exciting, because what we're finding is that people from all over the world are beginning to not only acknowledge that we're not alone, but they're beginning to do something about it. And a lot of people say, "Oh, my God," they get into these conspiracy theories. They say, "What can we do?" I say, "Oh, there's so much you can do, because everyone can do exactly what you're doing." And you identify some people of like mind. They understand the concepts in consciousness, practice them, intend to make contact for peaceful purposes, and then the things that unfold are just astonishing and beautiful. And that's happening. And the more that happens, the more it'll turn the entire state of the world in that direction, which is morphogenic fields propagate.
Well, somebody said, a CSETI member said, "Stephen is the roots and the trunk of the tree, and all of us are the branches. And the more we go out and establish these local groups, we become a tree that's so full of branches that the branches then have their own seeds." And I think once the government gets that this is already producing a forest of trees,
right,
that perhaps you'll be safer, and perhaps we'll all be safer.
Yes.
And that's why it's imperative for people to become ambassadors.
It is, and there's so much people can do to learn about it and be part of it. And, we've tried to make it as accessible as we possibly can, even to folks who can't come out for a week with us. And you can find out all about that at cseti.org and also disclosureproject.org. And it's just an exciting process, and I really want to thank you, Marilyn, for helping spearhead and with Diane and the people there in New York, because to have a group that meets on a regular basis and does this and grows in coherence creates its own local morphogenic field, as it were, and that coherence builds, and that's why your contact experiences are going to get more and more amazing, both individually but collectively. And that's a real process that once it gets established creates its own power, and that's why doing this with a few people who can be coherent and functional and loving and enjoy each other's company is such a great experience for people to have.
Well, Stephen, I want to say to you, you've taught us how to be ambassadors not only to the ETs, but to be ambassadors and ushering in this incredible time and this new shift and actually this new hope for Earth. So I can't thank you enough.
Oh, well, you're welcome. Well, I think we've run out of time. I can't believe it's been an hour already. It seems like it's been 15 minutes. Oh, we had a time warp. Well, I hope this has been informative for everyone, and thank you for being with me today on the show, Marilyn. And
you're welcome.
Say hi to all the dear people there in New York, and to everyone at the World Puja Network. Thank you for hosting us here, and I hope to see some of you soon at one of these expeditions under the stars. We're going to be gathering on Marco Island in April for a week, and there are others throughout the year in Colorado and California. And if you'd like to find out more, again, you can go to cseti.org, cseti.org, or disclosureproject.org, and look forward to seeing all of you soon out under the stars. So keep looking up. God bless you all, and goodbye.
Goodbye.